Now you look like the monster you are. That's what the note said when I woke up butchered. I didn't understand it at first. Not when my eyes cracked open to see sunlight streaming through the bedroom curtains. Not when my hand drifted sleepily to my face. Not even when my fingers brushed against my scalp and felt nothing. Just smooth skin, stubble, patches. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I sat up fast, too fast, and the room tilted. That's when I saw it. Auburn hair, my hair, scattered across the white silk pillowcase like fallen leaves. Chunks of it, long strands still clinging to the fabric. More on the comforter, the nightstand, even the floor beside the bed. I reached up with both hands, trembling now, and felt the destruction. Jagged edges where smooth waves used to fall past my shoulders. Bald spots near my temple. A rough, uneven mess that felt like someone had taken garden shears to me while I slept. And I had slept, deeply, completely unaware. My throat closed. I tried to breathe, tried to think, but panic crushed down on me like a weight. Who would do this? Then I saw the note. It sat propped against the lamp on my nightstand, crisp white paper with elegant handwriting in blue ink, the kind of penmanship that belongs on wedding invitations. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it on thank you cards, on the guest list she'd insisted on managing, on every passive-aggressive sticky note she'd left around my house over the past 6 months. Chelsea. My hands shook as I picked it up and read the words again. Now you look like the monster you are. This is just the beginning. See. I stared at it, read it twice, 3 times. The letters didn't change. Monster. I turned toward the mirror across the room, and what I saw knocked the breath out of me. A stranger stared back. A woman with hollowed eyes and a scalp that looked like it had been attacked in rage. Not cut, hacked. There was no style to it, no pattern, just violence. My stomach turned. I pressed a hand to my mouth and felt the tears burn hot behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Not while my mind was still screaming the same question over and over. Why? I hadn't done anything. I'd been good to Chelsea. Better than good. I'd been generous. I paid for this entire wedding, $80,000. The venue, the flowers, the band, the bar, even her dress. When she mentioned wanting a honeymoon in Santorini, I handed Marcus the check without hesitation. When she needed a place to stay while their house was being renovated, I opened my guest room and didn't say a word when she rearranged my kitchen cabinets. I smiled through her little comments. "Diane, don't you think that blouse is a little young for you?" I nodded when she suggested I sit at a side table instead of the family table at the rehearsal dinner. I told myself it was just nerves, wedding stress. I told myself she'd warm up to me eventually. But this? This wasn't nerves. I stood slowly, still holding the note, and walked to the window. Outside, the morning was perfect. Blue sky, birds singing, the kind of beautiful June day that belonged in a fairy tale. And in 4 hours, my only son was supposed to marry the woman who had done this to me. 4 hours. I could call the police. I could call Marcus. I could walk downstairs right now and show him what his bride had done to his mother while she slept under his roof. But even as I thought it, I knew he wouldn't believe me. Not without proof. Not when Chelsea had spent 2 years making herself the center of his world and gently, so gently, he's pushing me to the edges. I looked down at the note again. The words were so careful, so controlled. This is just the beginning. A chill crawled down my spine. This wasn't random cruelty. This was planned, calculated. Chelsea wanted me to know she'd done it. Wanted me to feel small and helpless and afraid. But why did she think I was a monster? I'd given her everything. I'd been nothing but kind. What could I have possibly? That's when I saw it. Tucked beneath the note, barely visible against the white linen, was a photograph. Old, yellowed at the edges, the kind that comes from a shoebox in someone's attic. I picked it up with numb fingers and turned it over. My blood ran cold. The photograph showed me, 28 years younger, standing outside a cafe I hadn't thought about in decades. And beside me, smiling with his hand resting just a little too familiarly on my shoulder, was a man who wasn't my late husband. On the back, in that same elegant handwriting, Chelsea had written one line. "I know what you did. I know who he is. You owe me silence." I stared at that photograph like it might burn my fingers. 28 years ago. God, I'd been 34. Marcus was just a boy then, maybe 14, still wearing superhero t-shirts and asking me to cut the crusts off his sandwiches. In the photo, I'm standing outside Morelli's Cafe, that little Italian place on Newbury Street that closed down years ago. My hair is darker, longer, and I'm wearing a cream cardigan I donated to Goodwill sometime in the late 90s. I'm smiling, not the careful, composed smile I wear now, but a real one. Open, young, and beside me, with his hand resting on my shoulder just a little too comfortably, is James Castellano. My chest tightened. I hadn't thought about James in, what? A decade? Maybe longer. He'd been a colleague at the consulting firm where I worked back then. Smart, warm, easy to talk to. The kind of man who remembered how you took your coffee and actually listened when you spoke. The kind of man I shouldn't have spent so much time with. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, still holding the photograph. The memories came flooding back whether I wanted them or not. That year, God, that year had been the hardest of my marriage. Thomas and I were barely speaking. He worked late every night, came home smelling like scotch and disappointment, and looked at me like I was just another bill he had to pay. We'd stopped laughing together, stopped touching. I felt invisible in my own home. And then there was James. He started in our department that spring. We worked on a project together, some corporate restructuring plan that required late nights and endless coffee. He made me laugh. He asked about my day and actually cared about the answer. When I mentioned I loved old movies, he brought in a VHS copy of Casablanca the next week and left it on my desk with a note. "Here's looking at you." I should have seen it coming. We started meeting for lunch, then coffee after work, then drinks on Fridays when Thomas texted to say he'd be late again. Nothing inappropriate, just two people talking, venting, finding comfort in someone who actually saw them. But I felt it, that pull, that dangerous, intoxicating feeling of being wanted again. One night, after a particularly brutal argument with Thomas, I called James. We met at Morelli's. I don't even remember what we talked about, just that he listened and didn't judge, and when he walked me to my car, he stood close, closer than a colleague should, and looked at me like I mattered. Someone must have taken that photograph then. Maybe a passerby, maybe a friend of his. I never knew it existed. I almost kissed him. I whispered into the empty room. Almost, because at the last second I stepped back. I remembered Marcus asleep at home. I remembered the vows I'd made even to a man who'd stopped honoring them. I remembered who I was, or who I wanted to be. I told James we couldn't see each other anymore outside of work. He understood, he was, kind about it even. A month later, he transferred to the Chicago office. I heard through colleagues that he'd gotten married, had kids, built a good life. And I stayed with Thomas. I worked on our marriage, went to counseling alone when he refused to go with me, tried harder, gave more, fought for us. 2 years later, he had a massive heart attack in his office. Gone at 52. I never told Marcus about that dark time. Why would I? Nothing happened. I'd made the right choice. There was no affair, no betrayal, just a lonely season I'd survived and moved past. But looking at this photograph now, with Chelsea's words scrawled on the back, I realized how it must look to someone who didn't know the whole story. "I know what you did." She thought I'd cheated. Maybe worse. Maybe she thought I'd caused Thomas's death somehow, that the stress of a failing marriage had killed him. Maybe in her mind, I was the villain in a story she'd constructed from a single photograph and whatever twisted narrative she'd built around it. But how did she even get this? Who was Chelsea, really? And why did she care so much about something that happened nearly 3 decades ago? My phone buzzed on the nightstand, loud in the quiet room. I picked it up with shaking hands. A text from an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. "Wear the gray dress I picked, sit in the back. Don't speak to Marcus before the ceremony. Do exactly as I say, or everyone learns the truth about you." The gray dress, the one Chelsea had dropped off last week, saying she wanted the mothers to coordinate. It was dull, shapeless, the kind of thing designed to make a woman disappear into the wallpaper. She wanted me small, silent, invisible. My hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with rage so hot it burned through the shock. This wasn't just about a photograph, this was about control. Chelsea had come into my life, into my home, taken my money, my generosity, my endless patience. And now she wanted to take my dignity too. She wanted to humiliate me at my own son's wedding, force me into the shadows while she stood in the spotlight as the beautiful bride. And she thought I'd just comply? I looked at my reflection in the mirror again, at the butchered hair, the raw scalp, the woman who'd been attacked in her sleep. 4 hours until the wedding. 4 hours to decide. Do I obey her threats and let her win? Or do I fight back and risk losing everything? I stood slowly, still gripping the phone, and realized something Chelsea had badly miscalculated. She thought she knew my secrets, but she had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. I built my whole life around being good enough for Marcus. It started the day Thomas died. I remember standing in that hospital corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of disinfectant burning my nose, while a doctor with kind eyes told me my husband was gone. Just like that, 52 years old, dead before the ambulance even arrived. I didn't have time to fall apart. Marcus was 14, he needed breakfast in the morning and help with algebra homework and someone to sign his permission slips. He needed a mother who didn't crumble, so I didn't. I worked. God, did I work. Double shifts at the consulting firm, then freelance projects on weekends. I'd sit at the kitchen table long after Marcus went to bed, calculator clicking in the silence, trying to figure out how to stretch Thomas's life insurance far enough to cover college someday. My eyes would blur from exhaustion, but I kept going because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice, we endure, we make it work. I turned down a promotion to senior partner because it would have meant traveling 3 weeks out of every month. Marcus needed me at his basketball games, his science fairs, his awkward middle school concerts where he played trumpet off key in the back row. I sat in those bleachers and told myself the money didn't matter. Being there mattered. I never dated, never even considered it. Men would ask sometimes, colleagues, neighbors, the nice widower from church, but I'd smile and politely decline. I told myself it was because I was too busy, but the truth? I was afraid. Afraid Marcus would feel replaced. Afraid he'd think I was trying to erase his father. So I stayed alone. By the time Marcus graduated high school, I'd built my own consulting firm from nothing. Small at first, just me and a rented office. But it grew. I was good at what I did. Strategic planning, crisis management, helping struggling companies find their footing again. Ironic, really. I could save everyone's business but my own marriage. When Marcus got into Boston University, I wrote the tuition check without hesitation. When he wanted to get his MBA, I funded that too. When he found a house he loved in Newton but didn't have enough for the down payment, I handed him $400,000 and watched his face light up like Christmas morning. "Mom, I'll pay you back," he'd said. "Don't be ridiculous," I'd answered. "It's yours. Build your life." He never asked where the money came from. Never wondered if I'd emptied my retirement account or taken a second mortgage on my own house. He just took it, smiled, hugged me, moved forward. I told myself that was enough. Then 2 years ago, he brought Chelsea home. She walked into my living room in a white sundress, honey blonde hair perfectly curled, and smiled like we were already best friends. "Mrs. Carter, Marcus talks about you constantly. I'm so excited to finally meet you." But her eyes were cold, calculating, like she was appraising an antique she wasn't sure was worth the price. I felt it immediately, that instinct mothers have when something isn't right. But I pushed it down. Marcus was glowing. He looked at her the way Thomas used to look at me, back when we were young and still believed in happy endings. I wanted him to be happy. So I welcomed her, invited them for Sunday dinners, smiled when she rearranged my bookshelf, because clutter stresses me out, nodded when she suggested I might want to update my wardrobe. Something more modern, you know? The comment started small. "Diane, don't you think calling Marcus 3 times a week is a little much? Maybe give us some space to build our own life? That necklace is lovely, but isn't it a bit young for someone your age?" Marcus started pulling away. Not dramatically, just slowly like a tide going out. Sunday dinners became every other week, then once a month. Phone calls got shorter. When I mentioned feeling left out, he sighed like I was being difficult. Mom, Chelsea's right. You need to let me grow up. As if loving him meant I was holding him back. When they got engaged, Chelsea asked if I'd help with the wedding. Of course I said yes. Then she handed me a budget that made my stomach drop. $80,000 for one day. Only the best for our special moment, she'd said sweetly. I wrote the check, told myself this would fix things. This generosity would show her I supported them, that I wasn't the overbearing mother-in-law she'd made me out to be. Maybe then she'd stop looking at me like I was an obstacle to remove. But standing here now, holding this photograph and staring at my ruined reflection in the mirror, I finally understood. Chelsea never wanted a relationship with me. She wanted control, money, power, and she'd spent 2 years strategically digging into my past, searching for leverage, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My eyes burned. I caught my reflection again. Patches of missing hair, red-rimmed eyes, the humiliation written across my face. Then I heard my mother's voice, clear as the day she'd said it 30 years ago. Baby, don't let kindness make you weak. I straightened my spine. Chelsea thought she'd cornered a helpless old woman, someone who'd roll over, stay quiet, accept whatever scraps of dignity she was allowed to keep. She had no idea who Diane Carter really was. I picked up my phone, hands steady now, and started making calls. The first call I made was to Renee. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and scratchy from 40 years of smoking cigarettes she swore she'd quit. Diane, honey, it's barely 7 in the morning. Renee, I need you, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Emergency. Can you come to my house? Now? There was a pause. Then without asking a single question, she said, give me 30 minutes. That's friendship. Real friendship. Not explanations or conditions, just I'll be there. Next, I called Bernard Hutchins, my attorney for the past 15 years. He'd handled Thomas's estate, my business contracts, and every legal document I'd signed since. If anyone could tell me where I stood, it was him. Diane? His voice was alert despite the early hour. What's wrong? The wedding, I said. I need to know exactly what I'm on the hook for. The $80,000 I've paid so far, can I pull any of it back? I heard papers rustling on his end. Let me pull up the trust documents. Hold on. While he searched, I dialed Victor Kane. Victor was a private investigator I'd met years ago, when I helped him restructure his failing agency during his messy divorce. He owed me, and more than that, he was good at his job, relentless, the kind of man who could find a needle in a haystack and tell you who put it there. Victor, I need a full background check on someone, I said the moment he picked up. Deep dive, everything you can find. Who are we looking at? His voice sharpened with interest. Chelsea Monroe, 29 years old, engaged to my son, and Victor... I glanced down at the photograph still sitting on my nightstand. If she dug into my past, I guarantee she's hiding something in hers. He was quiet for a beat. Then, if someone's weaponizing your history, they've usually got skeletons they're protecting. I'll have something for you in 2 hours. Make it 1, I said. Bernard came back on the line. Diane, good news. The wedding expenses came from the family trust you established, not your personal account. And according to the terms you set up, funds are only dispersed when milestones are completed. My heart kicked. Meaning the ceremony hasn't happened yet. Technically, you still control those assets. The vendors were paid deposits, but the bulk of the balance, nearly $50,000, hasn't transferred. I closed my eyes and felt the first real surge of power since I'd woken up butchered. So I have leverage. More than you think, Bernard said quietly. If you want to pull the funding, you can. It's your trust, Diane. Your rules. 20 minutes later, Renee knocked on my door. She swept in carrying a large black case, took one look at my head, and didn't flinch. Didn't gasp. Didn't ask who did it or why. She just set the case down on my dining room table, unzipped it, and said, "Let's fix this." Inside were 3 wigs, each one beautiful, soft, natural, expertly crafted. She lifted. The first one, a shoulder-length auburn style with subtle highlights. This one's close to your natural color. No one will know the difference. I ran my fingers through it. The hair felt real, moved like real hair. But it wasn't just about hiding what Chelsea had done. It was about walking into that wedding looking better than she expected. Not hiding, I murmured, meeting Renee's eyes in the mirror as she positioned the wig. Upgrading. She smiled, sharp and knowing. Damn right. When she finished, I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't a victim anymore. She was polished, composed, ready. Renee packed up her things and squeezed my shoulder. Go get her, honey. After she left, I sat down at my desk and opened the photograph again. James Castellano smiled up at me, frozen in a moment that felt like another lifetime. He'd been kind. We'd been close. But nothing happened. He'd moved to Chicago, gotten married, built a family. I'd stayed here and done the same. Our paths never crossed again, and I'd made peace with that years ago. So why did Chelsea care so much about a man I barely remembered? My phone buzzed. Victor's name flashed on the screen. I frowned. He'd said 2 hours. It had been 40 minutes. I answered. That was fast. Diane. His voice was tight, urgent. You need to see this. I'm sending files to your email right now. Check them. My laptop chimed. 3 PDFs appeared in my inbox. I opened the first one, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a birth certificate. Name, Chelsea Marie Castellano, not Monroe. Castellano, the same last name as the man in the photograph. My hands went numb as the pieces started to fall into place, and I realized this was so much worse than I'd thought. Chelsea Castellano was James's daughter. I stared at the birth certificate on my screen, the words blurring as my brain tried to catch up with what I was seeing. Father, James Michael Castellano. Mother, Linda Renee Castellano. Date of birth, April 15, 1995, 29 years old, which meant James had her just a few years after he moved to Chicago, after he left Boston, after we said goodbye in that parking lot and went our separate ways. I clicked on the second file, his obituary. James Michael Castellano, 64, passed away peacefully on March 12th after a long battle with heart disease. Survived by his daughter, Chelsea Marie Castellano. 3 years ago. He'd been gone 3 years and I never knew. My chest tightened with an old, unexpected grief. James had been kind to me during the loneliest season of my life. He hadn't deserved whatever unhappiness had followed him. But why was his daughter marrying my son? I opened the third file and my stomach dropped. Victor had pulled everything. Social media archives, digital footprints, search histories. It was all there, mapped out like a timeline of obsession. 3 years and 2 months ago, right after James died, Chelsea started searching for me. My name, my business, my family. She'd joined LinkedIn groups I was part of, followed my consulting firm's page, tracked down every article and interview I'd ever done. Then she'd found Marcus. Victor's notes were clinical but damning. Subject attended Boston Young Professionals Mixer on June 14th. Same event Target's son was scheduled to speak at. First contact appears deliberate, not coincidental. The networking event, the one where Marcus said he'd met the woman of his dreams. It had been a setup from the beginning. I scrolled further and found screenshots of old Facebook posts Chelsea had deleted. But nothing disappears completely when someone like Victor is looking. One post, dated 4 years ago, showed a photograph of James in a hospital bed, gaunt and tired. Chelsea's caption read, "My dad told me today about the woman who broke his heart. He said she was his one chance at real happiness, and she threw it away. He never recovered. I'll never forgive her." The woman who broke his heart. Me. But that wasn't what happened. We'd had coffee a handful of times. We'd talked. We'd almost crossed a line, and I'd stepped back. I'd chosen my marriage, my son, my life. Had James really spent 30 years romanticizing a relationship that never existed? Another screenshot, a journal entry Chelsea had posted after his funeral. He died believing he wasn't enough, that she didn't choose him because he wasn't worth it. I'm going to make her understand what it feels like to lose everything. My hands shook. Chelsea hadn't just stumbled into Marcus's life. She'd hunted him, studied him, molded herself into exactly the kind of woman he'd fall for. And she'd done it all to get close to me. Close enough to destroy me the way she believed I'd destroyed her father. The hair-cutting wasn't cruelty. It was a declaration of war. I sat back, the weight of it pressing down on me. My son, my sweet, trusting son, was about to marry a woman who saw him as nothing more than a weapon. And he had no idea. I clicked to the final page of Victor's report, expecting more of the same, but what I found there made my blood run cold. Financial analysis, red flags. Victor had gone deeper than I'd asked. He'd checked Marcus's accounts, cross-referenced transactions, traced transfers, followed the money. For the past 6 months, small amounts had been disappearing from Marcus's savings and investment accounts. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Never enough to trigger alerts, but steady, relentless. All of it funneled into an offshore account under the name CM Castellano. Chelsea wasn't just playing the long game for revenge. She was robbing him. I pushed back from the desk, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't about an old photograph or a misunderstood almost relationship from decades ago. Chelsea had targeted my son, manipulated him, bled him dry financially while planning to humiliate us both publicly and then disappear with everything she could take. I stood slowly, my decision solidifying like steel in my chest. I could call Marcus right now, send him these files, beg him to see the truth. But I knew my son. He'd been under Chelsea's influence for 2 years. She'd isolated him, turned him against me bit by bit. If I came to him with accusations, he'd see it as jealousy, desperation, a controlling mother who couldn't let go. No. If I was going to save him, I needed proof he couldn't deny. I needed witnesses. I needed the truth to be so undeniable that even Chelsea's carefully constructed lies couldn't stand against it. I looked at the clock, 2.5 hours until the ceremony. I wasn't going to hide in the back wearing the gray dress Chelsea had chosen. I wasn't going to sit silently while she played the blushing bride and made a fool of my son. I was going to that wedding, and I was going to burn her lies to the ground. I chose emerald green, not the dull gray dress Chelsea had left hanging in my closet, like a uniform for the defeated. Not black, which would have looked like mourning. Not soft pastels that whispered harmless and forgettable. Emerald green silk, a tailored suit I'd bought 2 years ago for a keynote speech where I'd negotiated a 7-figure deal. The jacket had strong shoulders and clean lines. The pants fell perfectly. When I put it on and looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who'd built a business from nothing, who'd raised a son alone, who'd survived betrayal before and would survive it again. Renee's wig sat perfectly on my head, auburn with golden highlights that caught the light. I styled it swept back from my face, confident and sleek, not hiding, not ashamed. This is my son's wedding, I thought, fastening pearl earrings. I'm not disappearing for anyone. I printed Victor's files and slid them into a leather portfolio, the kind I carried into boardrooms when I needed to deliver hard truths. Birth certificates, financial records, screenshots, everything. Then I called Bernard. "Meet me at the venue," I said. "Bring the trust documents. I may need to stop payment on the final transfers." "Diane, are you sure you want to do this today?" I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I texted Marcus one more time. "We need to talk before the ceremony. It's urgent. I love you." The message showed as delivered, then read, but no response came. I stared at the screen, my chest aching. Chelsea had him so tightly under her control that he wouldn't even answer his own mother on his wedding day. I grabbed my keys and left. The venue was beautiful. I had to give Chelsea that. Riverside Garden Estate sat on 3 acres of manicured lawns, with white arbors dripping in roses and a stone fountain that sparkled in the late morning sun. White chairs lined the aisle in perfect rows. String lights were woven through the trees, ready to glow at dusk. $80,000 of beauty, paid for with my money and built on lies. I stepped out of my car, portfolio in hand, and immediately felt the shift. Eyes turned toward me. Whispers rippled through the clusters of guests milling near the garden entrance. A group of young women, Chelsea's bridesmaids, I assumed, stood near the bar, and when they saw me, they exchanged glances and smirked. They knew. They knew about the hair, about the note. This was part of the plan. Humiliate Diane, make her the punchline, let her crawl into the wedding broken and obedient while they all watched and laughed. I lifted my chin and walked forward, heels clicking on the stone path. Let them look. I scanned the garden and spotted Marcus near the groom's suite, surrounded by his groomsmen. He was adjusting his tie, his face tight with stress. Not the glowing happiness of a man about to marry the love of his life. Tension, worry, and beside him, her hand possessive on his arm, was Chelsea. She looked stunning, of course. Pre-ceremony dress, a fitted white cocktail number that showed off her figure, hair in soft curls, makeup flawless. She laughed at something one of the groomsmen said, but her eyes were scanning the crowd, searching for me. When our gazes met, her smile froze for just a fraction of a second. Then it widened, sharp as a blade. She whispered something to Marcus and walked toward me, her heels barely making a sound on the grass. I stopped and waited. She reached me, all sugar and venom, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Mrs. Carter, so glad you could make it. And oh," she tilted her head, eyes flicking over my emerald suit. "I thought we agreed you'd wear the gray dress I picked out. You know, for coordination." "I don't remember agreeing to anything," I said evenly. Her smile tightened. She stepped closer, dropping her voice to a whisper only I could hear. "You're making a mistake. Walk away right now, or I'll tell Marcus exactly what kind of woman you really are. I have proof you cheated on his father, proof you drove James to his death." She thought she had me cornered. She thought I'd crumble under the threat, turn around, slink away like a dog with its tail between its legs. I met her eyes, cold, blue, so sure of her victory, and said quietly, "Is that what your father told you, Chelsea Castellano?" Her face went white. All the color drained from her cheeks. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She hadn't expected me to know. And in that moment, I saw the cracks in her armor, the fear, the shock, the realization that she wasn't the only one who'd done her homework. I smiled, calm, controlled. "We need to talk," I said softly, "somewhere private. Unless you'd prefer I say your real name a little louder?" Chelsea's recovery was fast. I had to give her credit for that. Her face smoothed over, the shock disappearing behind a practiced mask. She laughed, light, dismissive. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Mrs. Carter." "Castellano, you're confused." "Am I?" I opened the portfolio and pulled out the birth certificate. Chelsea Marie Castellano, born April 15, 1995, to James and Linda Castellano in Chicago, Illinois. Her eyes darted to the paper, then back to my face. "Where did you—" "I know who you are," I said, my voice calm but carrying across the garden. "I know why you're here, and I know you've been stealing from my son." That's when Marcus appeared. "Mom?" He pushed through a cluster of guests, his face flushed and confused. "What's going on?" Chelsea whirled toward him, her expression shifting instantly to wounded innocence. "Marcus, thank God. Your mother is trying to ruin our wedding because she's jealous. She's making up these insane accusations." I didn't raise my voice, didn't shout or accuse. I just looked at my son and asked one simple question. "Marcus, have you checked your investment account lately?" He blinked. "What?" No, why would I?" "Check it now." "Mom, this isn't the time." "Check it, please." Something in my tone made him stop. He pulled out his phone, fingers swiping across the screen. I watched his face as he logged in, scrolled, and then went very, very still. "There's money missing." His voice was barely a whisper. "A lot of money. How—" I handed him the financial records. 6 months of systematic transfers, small enough not to trigger alerts, all going to offshore accounts under the name CM Castellano. Marcus stared at the papers, his hands starting to shake. Chelsea lunged forward, trying to snatch them from his grip. "That's fake. She's lying. She hired someone to fabricate." "These are certified bank records," Bernard said, stepping forward from where he'd been waiting near the arbor. His voice was lawyer crisp, authoritative. "Pulled directly from your fiancé's financial institutions this morning. I can have the banks verify them in under an hour." A crowd was forming now, guests drawn by the commotion, phones discreetly raised, capturing everything. Marcus looked up from the papers, his face drained of color. "Chelsea, what is this?" "It's not what it looks like." "What is this?" His voice cracked. She changed tactics, spinning toward me with her eyes blazing. "You want to talk about lies? Let's talk about you, Diane. Let's talk about how you had an affair with my father while you were married, how you broke his heart and destroyed his life. She pulled the photograph from somewhere in her dress and held it up for everyone to see. That's her, 28 years ago, cheating on Marcus's father with my dad. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus stared at the photo, then at me. Mom? I met his eyes, my voice steady. Yes, I knew your father, briefly 28 years ago when your dad and I were going through a very difficult time. We had coffee a few times, we talked. He was kind when I needed kindness. You cheated. No. I said it firmly. Nothing happened between us. We were friends. It almost became more and I stepped back. I chose my marriage. I chose your father. I chose you. Chelsea's voice broke into something raw and desperate. He loved you. He told me you were everything, his one chance at real happiness, and you abandoned him. You ruined his life. I turned to her, and for the first time, I felt something other than anger. I felt sad. Chelsea, your father and I had a friendship, that's all. I ended it before it became something I couldn't take back. I'm sorry he was unhappy. I'm sorry he struggled. But I am not responsible for his life choices, and neither are you. You are. Tears streamed down her face now, mascara running. He died alone because of you. He died of heart disease, Victor said, appearing beside Bernard with another document in his hand. Natural causes. I have his death certificate right here. No connection to Mrs. Carter whatsoever. Marcus was still staring at Chelsea, the papers trembling in his hands. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? You targeted me. You used me. Her silence said everything. Say something. His voice cracked. Tell me, this is all wrong. Tell me you actually love me. Chelsea's mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a choked, desperate sound. The wedding planner stood frozen near the arbor. The officiant clutched his Bible awkwardly. Guests whispered and filmed and stared. She's still lying, Chelsea shrieked, pointing at me. She's still a liar. She drove my father to... But no one was listening anymore, and she knew it. Her face crumpled. Then she ran. Not a dignified exit. Not a tearful retreat. She just bolted, heels clicking frantically on the stone path, white dress streaming behind her like a broken sail. People stepped aside as she fled through the garden, past the fountain toward the parking lot. Marcus stood frozen, documents still clutched in his hands, staring at the empty space where his bride had been. Then he turned to me, his eyes red and lost. Mom, what just happened? I stepped forward and touched his face gently the way I used to when he was small and scared. You just dodged the worst mistake of your life. The guests left in waves, shocked whispers, sympathetic glances, phones still recording as they headed to their cars. Within 30 minutes, the beautiful garden was nearly empty. White chairs sat in perfect rows facing an arbor that would never see a ceremony. The string lights swayed gently in the breeze, waiting for a reception that would never happen. Marcus sat on a stone bench near the fountain, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. I sat down beside him and said nothing. Just waited. I'm so sorry, Mom. His voice was raw, broken. I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I know. She isolated me from you. Every time you called, she'd make these comments. Your mom's so needy. You need boundaries. And I believed her. I pulled away from you because I thought that's what being a man meant. I took his hand. It was bigger than mine now, rough with calluses from the gym, but I could still feel the little boy who used to grip my fingers crossing the street. Marcus, I gave you too much, I said quietly. I thought if I gave you everything, you'd never feel the pain I felt, but I didn't teach you to value it. I didn't teach you to recognize manipulation because I protected you from every hard thing. He looked at me, eyes red. You were a perfect mom. No. I squeezed his hand. I was a mom who loved you so much I forgot to prepare you for people like Chelsea. We sat there for a long time, talking, really talking, maybe for the first time in years. I told him about that year with his father, about how lonely I'd been, about James and the coffee dates and the almost kiss that never happened, about choosing to stay, choosing him, even when my marriage felt like it was crumbling. Dad wasn't easy, was he? Marcus said quietly. No, but he loved you, and I loved him, even when it was hard. Marcus asked about the money. Bernard joined us and walked him through it. Most of the wedding expenses could be recovered since the event didn't happen. The transfers Chelsea had made were fraudulent and could be reversed with legal action. She took over $60,000 from me, Marcus said, staring at the documents. We'll get most of it back, Bernard assured him. But son, you need to start watching your accounts, managing your own finances. Marcus nodded, shame coloring his face. Over the next few days, Chelsea vanished. No calls, no emails, just gone. Her apartment was cleared out, her phone disconnected. I could have pressed charges. Bernard said we had an airtight case for fraud, theft, emotional damages, but I didn't. She's sick, I told Marcus when he asked why. Grief made her into something she wasn't supposed to be. I'm not excusing what she did, but I'm not dragging you through a court case either. A week later, Chelsea's parents called. Older, worn-out voices full of apology and shame. She struggled after James died, her mother said. We tried to get her help, but she refused. We didn't know. We didn't know. I felt a complicated mix of anger and sympathy. Chelsea had been a victim too, of her father's romanticized grief, of a story that was never true. But that didn't erase what she'd done. Marcus moved out of the house he couldn't afford and into a modest apartment in Somerville. He started therapy twice a week, took a real job at a marketing firm, not a title in my company, but something he had to earn. 3 months later, he stopped by my office with coffee and asked if he could help with a client proposal. We worked side by side, and it felt different. Not mother and dependent child. Two adults building something together. He was learning, growing, becoming the man I always hoped he'd be. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I was in my kitchen making tea when my phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen, and my heart still jumped. Old instinct, old fear. But when I answered, his voice was light, happy. Mom, hey, can I bring someone by for Sunday dinner? I paused. Someone? Her name's Rachel. I've been seeing her for a few weeks. It's still new, but I want you to meet her, slowly, no pressure. Your opinion matters to me. My throat tightened with emotion. This was different. This was him asking, not announcing. This was him valuing my voice, not shutting it out. I'd like that, I said softly. Thanks, Mom. And I'm doing this right this time, I promise. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. I know you are, sweetheart. Growth. Real, earned, beautiful growth. The hair grew back silver. I didn't fight it. Didn't dye it auburn like before. Didn't try to recapture who I used to be. I let it come in soft and gray and short, and when I looked in the mirror each morning, I saw someone I'd been trying to meet for years. Diane. Just Diane. Not Marcus's mom, not the widow. Not the successful businesswoman wearing her accomplishments like armor. Just me. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It started with small things. When Marcus asked if I could lend him money for a security deposit on his new apartment, I said, no, sweetheart, but I can help you build a budget so you can save for it yourself. He'd looked shocked. Then, after a moment, he'd nodded. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Boundaries, healthy ones. They felt strange at first, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit. But the more I practiced, the more natural they became. I joined a book club that met Thursday nights at a cafe in Cambridge. 6 women, all around my age, drinking wine and arguing passionately about novels we'd never have time to finish. I laughed more in those 2 hours each week than I had in years. I started hiking on Saturday mornings. Nothing extreme, just trails through the Blue Hills Reservation, where the air smelled like pine, and the sunrise turned the sky gold and pink. I'd reach the summit, catch my breath, and feel alive in a way I hadn't since I was young. I went to the farmer's market and bought flowers just because they were beautiful. Peonies, sunflowers, dahlias, and deep burgundy. I filled my kitchen with color and didn't justify the expense to anyone. And one Thursday, a man from book club, David, a retired history professor with kind eyes and a terrible sense of humor, asked if I'd like to grab dinner sometime. I almost said no out of reflex. Then I heard myself say, I'd like that. We went to a little bistro in Brookline, talked about books and travel and what it felt like to rebuild a life after loss. He didn't try to fix me or impress me. He just saw me. Diane. Not a role or a function, but a person. It didn't turn into anything serious, neither of us wanted that, but it reminded me I was still someone worth seeing. One afternoon, I found the old photograph of James tucked in a drawer where I'd stored it after the wedding. I looked at it for a long moment, remembering the loneliness of that year, the choices I'd made, the life I'd built despite it all. I felt sadness, not guilt, not shame. Just quiet sorrow for a man who'd carried a story that wasn't true, and a daughter who'd inherited his pain. Then I threw it away. I didn't need it anymore. Marcus was thriving in ways I'd never expected. He worked hard at his job, earned a promotion, started paying his own bills. When he brought Rachel by for Sunday dinners, I saw the difference immediately. He listened to her, respected her, treated her like a partner, not a prize. "She's wonderful," I told him one evening as we cleared dishes together. "She is," he said. "And Mom, I'm doing it differently this time. I'm paying attention. I'm showing up." I squeezed his shoulder. "I know you are." Later that night, sitting in my living room with tea cooling in my favorite mug, I realized something that made my chest ache. I'd almost lost myself trying to hold on to him. I'd poured so much of my identity into being his mother that I'd forgotten how to be anything else. And when he'd pulled away, I'd felt like I was disappearing. But I wasn't disappearing. I was just becoming. The woman I saw in the mirror now, silver hair cut short and sharp, laugh lines around her eyes, shoulders relaxed. She was stronger than the one who'd woken up butchered 6 months ago. That morning was supposed to break me. Instead, it freed me. I stood, walked to my laptop, and sat down. My fingers hovered over the keys. I'd been thinking about this for weeks, about the other women out there who might be going through something similar. Mothers blackmailed by secrets that weren't even true. Families torn apart by manipulation. Women who'd forgotten who they were in the process of loving everyone else. I had a story to tell. And maybe, just maybe, it could help someone else find their way back to themselves. I started typing. If you're still here, thank you. That means this story meant something to you. And I didn't share it for shock value or sympathy. I shared it because I know I'm not alone in what I went through. Maybe you've been the mother who gave too much, who sacrificed until there was nothing left, who measured your worth by how much you could provide. Maybe you've been the child who took without seeing, who didn't understand the cost of love until it was almost too late. Maybe you've been the person holding a secret, something small, something innocent, and someone twisted it into a weapon against you. If any of that feels familiar, I want you to know. You're not broken, you're not weak, and what happened to you wasn't your fault. Here's what I learned through all of this. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't build a healthy relationship on fear or guilt, and you can't live freely while hiding who you really are. If someone is blackmailing you, using your past, your mistakes, or even things that aren't mistakes against you, get help. Tell someone you trust. Bring it into the light, because shame only has power in the darkness. If your family is draining you emotionally, financially, or mentally, it's okay to set boundaries. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're self-respect. And the people who truly love you will understand that. And if you've forgotten who you are because you've spent so long being what everyone else needed, it's not too late to remember. Start small. Say no to one thing that doesn't serve you. Pick up an old hobby. Reconnect with a friend. Take one step toward the person you used to be or the person you've always wanted to become. I still miss the Marcus who held my hand crossing streets, who called me every night from college just to say goodnight, who thought I hung the moon. But I'm learning to love the Marcus who's becoming a man, flawed, learning, growing, someone I can respect, not just someone who needs me. And for the first time in decades, I'm learning to love Diane, not Diane the mother, not Diane the CEO, not Diane the widow or the caretaker or the woman everyone expects me to be. Just Diane, the woman who hikes on Saturdays and argues about book endings and is learning, slowly, that her worth was never tied to what she could give away. Your story matters. If you're comfortable, share it in the comments. Maybe it's about a family member who took advantage. Maybe it's about finding yourself again after years of being invisible. Maybe it's just about learning to say no. Whatever it is, I want to hear it. Let's build a community where truth matters more than secrets, where we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. If this story helped you in any way, please hit that like button so I know it resonated. Subscribe if you want to hear more, not just from me, but from others who've survived and thrived, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for walking this road with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, right now, in this moment. Remember, they tried to make me a monster by cutting my hair. Instead, they cut the chains. I'm free now, and you can be too. Diane closes her laptop gently. She stands and walks to the window where golden morning sunlight streams through sheer curtains. Her short silver hair catches the light. She smiles, not the practiced, polished smile of someone performing, but something real, imperfect, human. She takes a slow breath, sets her coffee cup down, and looks directly at the camera one last time. Warmth in her eyes, peace in her posture. You are not alone.